Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, I sit down with Dustin Oprea to talk about Only the Brave, a true story about the Granite Mountain Hotshots, wildfire firefighters from Arizona. We dwell on this line. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. We can only live to the identity we have received and embraced. How can this help us in our initiation and discipleship to become more like Jesus? Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me from Atlanta on the Zoom Riverside studio, whatever you call it, online, hopefully one day we'll get to share air together there, Dustin, is my friend Dustin Oprea. Hey, Dustin, how you doing today?
Hey, Paul, I'm doing great. Down here just north of Atlanta in Roswell, Georgia. It's a little rainy, but just dropped my boys off at school and going to enjoy some time just hanging out with you.
So I was looking back at some of the movies that we've done together as I was preparing for this. And so I feel like there's some themes to the movies that you like. So here's the list that Dustin and I have done together in no particular order. Defiance, Mask of Zorro, The Guardian, Only the Brave, which we're talking about today, and 12 Strong. So when you look at those movies as a cohesive whole, as a unit, these are the movies that you picked out. And I watched Only the Brave last night with my 16-year-old son, because what I find is that the movies that I watched that you've suggested, Dustin, I'm like, man, I wish I watched this with my son. So I actually saved this for him. And he really, because he loves these sorts of, and I'm going to put my own interpretation here, the standing in the gap movies, the sacrificial, there is something greater that I'm devoting my life to movie. So that's one of the connecting threads I see. What do you see?
Yeah, we oftentimes whenever we listen to podcasts, right, we're like, oh, well, they have this scripted out, or they've talked about this for weeks or whatever. And you are just asking me this, and I'm going to have to share my heart. And hopefully I don't break down crying. So I'm having to concisely say this, but essentially, so I'm 39 years old. I got 3 boys, been married for 15 years. The reason I was drawn to this podcast was because there's a line, I think in the introduction, or maybe at one point in the early episodes, was every movie that we're drawn to is like a modern day parable. Mm-hmm. That's how Jesus spoke whenever people would listen. He told stories. He didn't just speak, let me tell you these commandments, which sometimes religious people or people that attend church for the first time maybe think, but he was a storyteller. He was so engaging, and the reason we love certain movies, whatever our heart is drawn to, it's modern-day parables. And in this season of my life, approaching 40, I'm doing a lot of reflection, a lot of internal work, trying to understand what's going on in my life, and why do I respond to my wife this way? Why do I respond to my kids? Why do I think this? Why do I do this? Why do I don't do this? And watching these movies, every one of them, as you said, they have some greater purpose, but they're working through some internal struggle. And along the way, as they work through this internal struggle, they meet some sort of guide, mentor, brother, father figure, maybe both in some scenarios in these movies I've chosen. And these people, through strength and love and honoring the other person, there's yelling, there's crying, there's shame, there's guilt, there's love, there's joy, and they're holding it all. Of course, every movie is 90 minutes to 120, and So you have to hold the joy and the love, the tough love and the tenderness all together, and then the pain too they're walking through. And to watch that, I'm like, man, I just see myself in all these characters. And it's putting words around things that I experience in myself, my brain and my heart. And I told someone maybe 10 years ago, I don't read books because I want to read them cover to cover. I read them for great paragraphs that are going to change my life. And now I watch movies because there's a great line in a movie that I'm going to write down, and it's going to help shape my next day, my week, maybe the rest of my life.
I loved what you said. It's putting words around what you know to be true from your own experience, from your own life. And I love what you said is these lines. And that's what we're grabbing today from Only the Brave, is we're going to center it on a line that comes super late in the movie. By the way, when I watched this last night, I didn't do any research ahead of time. So, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the movie. And it's a fairly new movie, I think 2017. And it's a fairly recent event, I think 2013, 14.
Correct. It was 2013. So it's a true story.
Yeah. And from everything I read after, it's really pretty accurate, at least in the depiction of the events. I'm not sure about the actual characters and stuff. But, dude, that scene when the medic walked up after the fire had gone through and everyone was dead was shocking to me. That's not what you get typically from these movies. You're like, oh, I thought a couple, probably the ones we don't know, because that's what you see in some of these less risky stories we watch. They kill off minor characters while maintaining the ones. But our lives aren't like that, are they?
No.
And so I was shocked. I was all choked up and emotional. My wife's like, why are we watching this terrible movie? Which it's not. It got like an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. It didn't do well at the box office, I think, for that very reason, because it is real and it's current. It's a recent event. I'm sure the families of these firefighters are still struggling in many ways, grieving the loss of their loved ones. And this movie has a stellar cast. My son was making rooster type comments throughout the movies for miles there.
Yes.
But this line that we're going to talk about, and we're going to probably play the clip last as we work through this. But this idea, and it's something Eric Marsh, played by Josh Brolin, played by Thanos, there at the end, he tells Brendan, he says, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And that is, we're going to basically spend the rest of this podcast dissecting this idea. Because as you mentioned, you and that's why movie quotes resonate. And that's why I think that's why we do this podcast, but that's why we love movies. That's why we love movie quotes, is because they put words around what we know to be true. Mm-hmm. And that's an eye-opening line, especially when, as you say, especially as you say, when we take that line and we're going to go back and look through the movie, through the story, through that lens, because there's so much unsaid stuff. I'm going to tee you up to the first scene because it was so powerful for you. Because the relationship between Eric and Amanda, played by Jennifer Connelly, not to go, repeat of Top Gun Maverick again, but but it's so well shown. It's such a good portrayal of what a good marriage is like, or a good marriage can be, in that it's not always good. So Dustin, do you want to tee up that first scene between the two of them?
Man, yeah, I didn't notice it the first time I watched the movie. So I watched it again last night. It was my third time. And I had to pause it and rewind it and watch, because it's the very beginning of the movie. We see a man, Eric Marsh, get up. He gets a phone call. There's a fire he's got to go put out. That's not figurative. Like, he's a firefighter. So he's about to go out to work. And anytime he leaves the house,
it doesn't all have to be parallels and, and parables and figurative speech. He literally needed to put out a fire.
He is going out, and he could be gone for half a day. Could be multiple days, where they spend the night out in the woods around thousands and thousands of acres and putting fires out. She's doing work on the sink, getting her mind off of, because he just got a call and he's going to have to leave. She turns around and makes eye contact, and he's looking at his phone or something, not making eye contact. So immediately, for anyone that has ever had a relationship with anyone, if someone you love turns around and makes eye contact and you immediately look down, something's off.
Red flag.
So in the first 90 seconds of the movie, you see her move towards him, but is clearly upset. And he's about to walk out the door. And she looks him in the eye and says, "You got anything you want to say to me before you walk out that door?" Oh, the invitation for being true and what's really going on. Because he's this big Josh Brolin. Yeah. He's a superintendent of a very prominent firefighter squad that's trying to become like SEAL Team-esque in the area. What's this called? Hotshots.
Well, and not just a firefighter squad, but wildlife fires, right? They talk about it. There's a difference, yes. Just like the Rangers talk differently about the general infantry, right? I want to go fight structure fires because that's safer than going out into the wilderness and battling a wildfire.
Mm-hmm. I think the reason I loved that scene so much as I watched it last night is, if you can imagine a wife working at a sink, turn around and makes eye contact with her husband who's about to walk out the door. And she asks, "Anything you want to say to me?" And he says, "Yeah, I probably said some shit last night I shouldn't have." And she moves closer to him and hops up on the counter. He's this big, tall man. She is this tiny little, she's probably 8 inches shorter than him. She hops up on the counter and sits and gets 3 inches from his face. It's a beautiful image of just how people who love people deeply are willing to move towards them to understand what's going on, from their head to their heart. That kind of 18-inch journey.
Yeah.
And she simply just asks, "Okay, you said some stuff. Why?" And then he does what he does all throughout the movie. He doesn't really respond. He calls her Amanda Bear. "Why are you so good to me, Amanda Bear?" And then it goes on to the next scene. But you see this moment where she has apparently done a whole lot of work, not on him, but on her.
Yeah.
To be able to move in his direction that way. Whew, it's powerful.
Because as we find out through the movie, they've both been addicts. They've both fought their addictions. And that scene, we're not sure what scene we're putting up on YouTube, but we've got really probably 3 options, and one of them we'll put up there. But the scene in the truck is definitely a contender, because they're fighting, and she says, "Yes, and he says, "You know who I was when we got married." Basically, "You knew that." And she says, "Yeah, but I've changed." It's like people change, people grow, people progress. And basically, in many ways, he was the same guy. And that scene, like the line that made him get out of the truck is, "You basically traded one addiction for another." Mm-hmm. And so wrapping this back up into, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. He's not seeing her as inviting. He's not seeing her really as independent as we'll come to find out, as because living the life of, I mean, if you're a soldier's spouse, if you're a policewoman's spouse or partner, if you're firefighter, these people who in many ways put their lives on the line every day. If you're in the military and your spouse gets deployed, you're a single parent for 3-6 months, a year maybe. She didn't know how long he'd be gone because sometimes you fight wildfires for days, weeks. And so there's that uncertainty, and he has forced her to learn independence. Like, that's the cool thing, is she's the one working on the sink in the flip of the stereotypes, right? He doesn't look at her that way because he doesn't look at himself that way. He still sees himself as the addict, which is that avoiding of the why question. It's like, well, why? I don't have time to wrestle with that. I don't have time to sit in the silence. I just have to go fight fires because keeping busy helps me avoid asking these deeper questions.
I'm going to go do something that I have more control over and talent at, instead of doing something really, really uncomfortable and maybe something I've never done before, to access something internally and process it with someone and trust them with it.
I want to take that picture, right? That picture of this discussion. A husband and wife love each other, obviously just got in a fight. We don't know what it's about. We don't know what was said. He doesn't really apologize, but he does move towards her. Through the movie, we'll see that she's a very independent woman. She's cares for the horses. They bring her horses who are sort of, some people foster rescue dogs. She fosters rescue horses. And that's how she pours her heart out. That's where she spends her energy. Even gets in a car wreck at one point and he's mad at her. And she's like, I am independent. I'm fine because that's the woman I have to be. That's the woman you made me be by being gone weeks and months out of the year. And so through the course of the movie, we focus on the story of Brendan, played by Miles Teller, and how he started off as a junkie. We see him getting high. We see him getting drunk, thrown out of a bar. He got a girl pregnant. The girl doesn't want anything to do with him because he's such a piece of trash. He's like, oh, I have a kid. Why didn't you tell me? And she doesn't want anything to do with him. He has to hide, but it changes him. And we see that in the scene that we're going to play on YouTube, where the interview between Eric and Brendan, and how basically parenting changes us, how something grabs us. And thankfully, we all have something in our lives that will grab us. So check that out on our YouTube channel. But the long story short here, Eric takes a chance on Brendan. Brendan puts in the work. We see him dropping off groceries at his baby's house. We see that relationship grow where he comes to know his daughter. They are successful. They get this group gets their certification so they can be escalated and they can be one of those premier firefighting units in the country. And so they're out celebrating. They just had this they saved the iconic tree. And so they're celebrating in the bar. And Brendan wants to take a minute to have a conversation, one, to show his appreciation to Eric for taking a chance on him, but also to say, I need to put my family first. And would you vouch for me for this other guy? So, because like we said, working structure is not nearly as dangerous as working out in the wild. And so as I play this clip between Eric and Brendan, I want you guys to listen and apply that line. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And what gets put on each person from each guy's perspective.
I wanted to talk to you for a sec.
What? About what?
Well, I wanted to thank you for everything that you've done.
I didn't do anything. I'm good.
No, you took a big chance on me. I know that.
Oh, the world's full of people taking chances, don't it?
Jesus, why can't you just say you're welcome?
Because I know I'm uncomfortable with gratitude. I don't like it.
All right, well, too bad. That's what this is, gratitude.
Okay. All right. I can live with that, I guess. Oh, God. So we good?
There's something else I do want to talk to you about. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and after this fire season's over, I want to move over to the structure side. And I was hoping maybe you could put in a good word with Chief Ellis for me.
Okay. All right. All right, let me just see if I got this down. So you brought me out here to thank me for giving you a chance that nobody on the face of the fucking earth would give you. And your way of showing appreciation is to then say to me that, what, you're gonna quit on me and this crew?
Look, Soup, I'm having a hard time. It's tough. I'm having a hard time being a good dad and doing this job.
Okay, everybody's having a hard time because most of the men on this crew have families, and I don't hear any of them bitching. Do you?
Yeah, look, I can't speak to that, okay? I don't know.
No, you can.
I didn't have a dad growing up. He wasn't around for me, so I'm not going to do that to my daughter, man. That's it.
So what? So what? Donut, huh? I mean, do you think anyone's going to hire a cheese dick like you on the structure side, an asshole with a record and a rep? That's just never going to happen. And then what? Huh? You're going to be washing dishes, miserable? How long do you think you're going to stay clean then? Now listen to me. Listen. If you quit this crew, you're going to either end up dead or behind bars.
Going back to that quote that happens at the end of the movie that we're looking through the lens, right, Paul? We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. So in that moment, you got the young Brendan, who has really gone through the last, I don't know, it's probably about a year of his life at this point, because we meet him at the beginning of the movie where he gets a girl pregnant. And then at this point, his girl has been born and is several months old.
Yeah.
He's gone through a season where he's gotten clean. He has gotten in good shape physically. He has purpose vocationally. He's seen success vocationally. And it's taking him away from something where his heart is really wanting to go to. And you see Eric Marsh, who has given his whole life to this job, has a beautiful wife, and a really good relationship with her. But we find out there's a desire she has for family.
Yeah.
He didn't want to have kids for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. He prioritized the job, putting out fires, no matter what.
And the question becomes, why? Remember that question? Like you said some shit last night. Why? We like to say in our men's areas here is when things flash up, when things flare up, what's behind that? Mm-hmm. So when you look at his getting lost in the work, and we'll talk about that, their fight in the truck, which was a phenomenal scene. The question comes, as you see him interacting with Donut, as he calls him, what's behind that? What's behind that getting lost in the work?
Mm-hmm. What's so interesting in that quote, I don't think I really recognized it when I watched the movie, but he said, I don't do well with gratitude.
Right?
The scripting of that message with that character is so interesting because it's almost like he hasn't let him be grateful for anything. and that is the character. Yet he displays so much strength as a superintendent to these boys, these younger men that he is raising up right before our eyes in the movie. He's affirming them, giving them direction, sacrificing himself first, putting himself out there, helping them be elevated to be hotshots by risking his own career, by going to the mayor to get him elevated. And so in that moment, he's the one flaring up and getting angry. And Brendan's the one actually bringing strength and saying, I want to fight for a woman who's not even mine. She just had our baby. And I want to go take care of that baby because I want to give her a life that I didn't have. And he even says, I can't speak to the other guys in their decision. I'm taking care of my area. That he doesn't say this, but we receive this, Paul. He's taking care of the kingdom that God has given him.
And that takes a lot of strength and maturity and really shows the growth of Brendan through the movie, through this process.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to stay up as I can't speak for them. But because he's changed. We see things as we are. He shows up in the office admitting, yep, smoking dope, doing stuff, got a felony. That's who he was. Now he's like, I am a father and I've got to do right by my baby girl because I'm out risking my life. I'm out. She's seen me 2 days this month. She's scared of me. That's not who I want to be. And yeah, what's behind that? I thought it was so interesting how he's dismissing the gratitude Brendan is trying to share, to offer. Oh, anybody would have done it. And then the flip of I want to leave, I want to quit. It flips and he's not scared. I can't remember the line. All of our responses, our anger responses are basically are sourced in fear of something, fear of something happening, someone. Mm-hmm. It's the source of our reaction like that is fear. And we see, because you're like, okay, well, he's making a decision. I wouldn't. We don't see this response with the other guys that have left. And the fear is because he sees himself in Brendan, as we'll see in the last clip we'll play. But he lashes out. He's like, I can't accept gratitude because he's not deserving of it in his heart. And what he's lashing out is not the lack of appreciation that he feels, but because he knows that he is holding on to that job for his life. He's like, oh, what are you going to do? Who's going to take a chance on you? That's you think anyone would hire you? Nobody's going to hire you, because that's how he feels about himself, that no matter what he achieves, nobody's going to hire him. Nobody's going to love him. Nobody's going to accept him. Which, my guess, would be his fear for children. Who am I to be a dad? Look at this train wreck of things I made. And it's been years, right? We're guessing that he's been clean and sober for at least 6 years. But it's never enough. And one of the lines Morgan says is, and I'm paraphrasing it because I don't remember exactly what it is. We can never rise beyond the identity that we have basically grasped for ourselves. That's why it's so dangerous to say stuff like, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. That may be true, but if all you are is a sinner, that's all you'll ever be. It doesn't matter that you're a saint, that you're part of a royal priesthood, that you're beloved by God. If all you see is a sinner, and person who's despicably wicked at all times, right? I mean, my every thought is sin. Well, then you're going to live that out.
I love that. I think, I don't know what that exact line is from Morgan Snyder that you're quoting, But I do think it is something like you can't live beyond the identity that you've received. Is it received, or maybe that's just how
It might be.
I've heard it, where he was like
how we've interpreted it.
Yeah, it's how I've interpreted it. And speaking of receiving, it's why I love movies like this, because it's the heart of the Father is one who wants to give love through affirmation and validation, right? And God is both masculine and feminine, and the heart of the feminine side of our God really comes with this robust well-being, and there's an abundance. And Jesus speaks to it. I want you to have life, and life to the full, abundant, overflowing. There's always enough. You stand at the coastline. I grew up in South Carolina. You're in North Carolina. I went to the beach last week. The ocean, I mean, it is massive. His love is bigger than the ocean. I can't even concept that. I can't wrap my mind around that.
Breaks our brains, doesn't it?
It does. And so I can only live to the point of my identity that I've been willing to receive. So taken in the context of this movie, Brendan clearly says to Eric, I never had a father. And he didn't say this in the movie, but he's looking at Eric as his father. You gave me a chance. I'm thanking you. I am receiving something from you that I've never received before. And that's the only way he can give it to his daughter. And he's choosing that. And so he sees Eric as a father figure, as a daddy, and says, I'm thanking you for what you've given me. And now because of that, I can go give this to my daughter. I have strength to give. And Eric only sees his identity of what he offers for his job.
Well, and it's interesting that you said that about the idea that Brendan has received in many ways his initiation. He received the shoes so they could go running, and then puts in all the effort. He's received the training. He's received the guidance and validation, because he came in and he was nothing. He was a dope smoker, addict, no good. Now he's a hotshot. And because he has received his strength and his initiation, like you were saying, he could pour that to his daughter, but he can stand up and say, I've received this. And the problem with, and I loved what you just said, Eric only saw what his worth was from his job. Yeah. And he saw in that moment, he only saw Brendan as a firefighter. He didn't see the man he had become and was becoming. What, you're going to quit on me? I won't. And I think back to his interview. If you just give me a chance, I won't let you down. And because he was so focused on who he was, Eric was so focused on who he was and his validation coming from work that he couldn't understand what Brendan was willing to do for his daughter and how that actually meant he had grown and become a stronger person. He wasn't dependent on the dope. He wasn't going out. The addictions didn't control him anymore, but he failed to see that because he himself lives in fear. Fear of messing up, fear of losing everything, fear of letting people down. And because he's so upset, he goes, his wife is dancing with his best, his mentor, right? Dwayne.
Jeff Bridges.
Yeah. The Big Lebowski. And he grabs her and they're going out in the car and he tells her, he's like, I'm so upset. And she's confused because she's like, we were having a great time at this party. Why did you pull me out? Kids leave all the time. Why this one? Why is this one impacting you so much? And this is where sort of we see a lot of all the stuff that's been bubbling under the surface between them the whole movie come to the forefront, and her strength and vulnerability, I think, come into play again, going back to that. We don't see things as they are. we see things as we are, and how that applies in this scene here.
So why are you so pissed at this kid?
A year ago, he was a junkie. Tonight, he's a hero?
Huh.
I mean, come on. This job saved his life, and now he'll probably end up right back where he started.
Well, if you think that he might relapse, maybe you should take him to a meeting with you. Does he even know that you go to meetings?
It's nobody's business but my own.
Okay, so you're pissed because you think he owes the job something more than his own daughter.
I didn't say that.
Oh, maybe it's because he made the choice that you're avoiding.
His thing has nothing to do with me, okay?
I think it's got everything.
No. I don't want to do this.
Well, you know what? You've had one day off in the last month, which you spent sleeping, so when are we supposed to do it?
What?
I'll tell you what. You live your life in a glass box with a sign that says break in case of fire. You are 90% hotshot, you are 10% mine, and that is not enough.
What is that? Is that an ultimatum?
No,
Is that what it is?
I'm telling you how I feel, and that's different. I want a family with a man that I love.
You knew exactly what the deal was when we got into this, okay? I've been straight with you from the first day that we met.
We were in the same place then. That was 6 years ago, and people are supposed to be changed by their relationships. That's what happened to me. I let you in. I've been changed by you. I'm a different person. I have moved on from my addiction, and you are still fucking feeding yours with another kind of drug.
We all need that kind of wife who will call us out. I mean, such beauty is being offered. I have been changed by you. I have let you in. What greater honor is there than that? She's begging him to engage. And he's in her vulnerability, seeing that he's refusing to be vulnerable. He still sees things as they were, as he was. He's like, this doesn't have anything to do with it. He's like, it's got everything to do with it because you're projecting your fears on him. You know, I've heard this line. It's not even a line. It's just this concept that when we look at the people who irritate us, who upset us, who get on our nerves, and we focus on those things that they do that grate on us, that it's actually not them. It's what it says about us. There's something that they are revealing about us. And that is exactly what she said. You are mad at him because he's making a choice you're too scared to make.
We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. This whole movie is bringing things to the surface of Eric Marsh, played by Josh Brolin, to help himself see himself as he is. Because everyone else around him already sees it. His wife definitely sees it. His mentor sees it. We see that in a beautiful interaction towards the end of the movie where he says, I am scared to death. Josh Brolin, Eric Marsh, I'm scared to death. And I love that statement, which is a very common thing. I'm scared to death. I'm scared to death. Why? Because if we're really honest with ourselves of what we know God is leading us to do right now in the moment, it should feel like death. And I love how...
Wait. Sit on that. It should feel like death. Why?
Well, in the context of people changing, being changed by people who love them and people who we love, in the context of our Father sending a son, Jesus, who did something out of love for us so that we'll be able to experience love and therefore true love for other people and receive it from other people. There are things that we run after to receive that love. Job. And in this movie, that's the main thing that we see. Substance abuse is one of them. Eric overcomes it, but his love, his affection, his desire to be validated and have identity, moves to a job. And he sees Brennan, druggie, gets validated by good times, get kicked out of bars, having buddies they can joke around and get high with. He changes to become a man who is now fathered a child and wants to choose that over a job. And it's revealing something out of him that he has always wanted, but he's scared to death to do.
Mm.
But it means he's going to have to give up some version of himself that he's always viewed himself as a hotshot, whatever goal he's had job-wise, in order to give himself to something that's way more valuable and important, that he's already decided is more valuable, but something else is going to have to die.
In many ways, that's his old identity. Mm-hmm. He's afraid if he leaves the Hotshots, he's going to end up back where he was before. Like, I love it. It's like, that's none of my business. That's nobody's business but my own if I'm going to meetings. I love it that we never know exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. It's just something. We go to meetings. They talk about their addiction. Because it could be the usual, people talk about having the alcoholic, I'm addicted to alcohol, drugs, porn, sex, all the things, but they feed it. I used to work with a group of guys coming out of addiction, and they'd substitute their hard drugs or their alcohol for caffeine drinks and cigarettes. And they pound those things, go through them like crazy. They traded an unhealthy one for a healthier one. Maybe a less unhealthy one is a better way to put it. And she said, no, you're not him anymore. You're just afraid to admit it. You're just afraid to step into who you are. Like, I want a family with the man I love. Like, seriously, who would not just love to hear that from their brides, right? And she is validating him even in the middle of showing him the mirror. And that's what it's interesting. I read James today, and it talks about if we read the word of God and walk away without doing it, it's like looking in a mirror and then going away and forgetting. And thankfully in this scene, he looks in the mirror that she holds up. And he goes and talks to his mentor, Dwayne. And they have a great conversation sitting on the porch. Beautiful, where he says, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm on fire. He compares himself to seeing, he saw a grizzly bear run out of the woods on fire and says, it's the most beautiful and terrible thing I've ever seen. I feel like that bear. Because the old has to die. Mm-hmm. Who we were has to die. We have to see things as we are, as we can be, and not as we think they are. He saw himself as an addict, and that is all he'd ever be. Without that job, he would be back washing dishes. He would be there changing diapers. And you see, I knew a guy who was a fire chief, and he retired and died like within months because who he was died, and he didn't know who he was outside of that. And that's our challenge today, because we all get that mirror at some point, and it's never comfortable. Also in James, he talks about when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for joy, because your faith is being tested. Your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it go. So let it grow, not let it go, Disney song, but let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. And then it's interesting because he did that paragraph, that little state wisdom bomb there. And then he almost like goes on a couple paragraphs and then comes back to it and says, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. afterward they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. So we have to go through that testing and trial to test our faith, our belief in who we are and who God is, because that's where we get our identity. God, I believe this about you. And in a way, it's like, do you? Let's see. It's time for the rubber to meet the road. And that's again what James talks about. Show me your faith. Say you have faith without works. I show you my faith by my works. Eric lived his life showing his faith. He lived out who he was without actually seeing who he was. And so he was able to go and have a conversation with his wife. And then, of course, as it happens in these movies, he gets called away. And he has a chance to, again, to not confront isn't the right word, to have restoration of relationship with Brendan. So, because they get called out, they have another fire. He said, "Hey, Donut, let me talk to you for a minute." And he apologizes for what he said in that previous conversation the previous night.
Listen, I'm sorry about last night. I don't know how to explain, but sometimes we don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. You understand that?
Yeah, think so.
What happened wasn't about you. It was about me. It was you. I will help you out in any way I can, so long as you walk the line. Do you hear me?
Paul, going back to this scene at the bar where Eric Marsh says, "I don't do well with gratitude." He just expressed gratitude. And so we see in that moment, without it being scripted out in characters, we see him accessing a part of him that his wife sees. He just hadn't seen it himself. He's accessing a part of him that is grateful for the relationship that he has had with Brendan. And he is understanding things about himself in light of the opportunity he's had to be a father figure to Brendan. And Brendan has received it. And you see Eric receiving in a different way, a different dynamic, that he has offered something to someone else, like a son, that he's been scared to death to ever have with his wife. That he does have the strength to offer that, and he's beginning to access it. And there's a beautiful exchange there in him maturing that his wife has always seen, but the job has been in the way. The firefighters see it in Eric every day. His wife gets 10%. She wants it all.
Yeah.
And I think later that night, or maybe the night before, he says that statement to her in their bedroom. He says, "You have all of me, Amanda Bear." 100%. There is so much healing there in Eric Marsh in that, 30 seconds. It's beautiful.
It reminded me of what Jesus said about the plank and the speck. And what he was doing was seeing the speck in Brendan's eye. Because that's what he said is an honest expression of his fear. I'm scared if you leave, you might fall back. Remember, I'll back you 100%. You just walk the line. You stay clean and I'll back you all the way. He expressed his fear in a healthy manner, his speck, because Brendan, that was all it was, yeah, I'm a little nervous that's going to happen too, I bet. But what it was it was about him. It wasn't about you. It's about me. Your speck is fine. I need to deal with my plank.
Oh, that's so good, Paul. Mm-hmm.
And because it's so often it's about us more than about anybody else.
Yes.
Whatever it is. Why do you get mad about something? What is it you're afraid of? this world is not meant to be walked through smoothly. But through the trials, it exposes who we are, who we believe God to be, and we clean out the crap if we let it. If we ask the questions, why? Why am I reacting this way? What's behind this response? Why am I so angry? Why am I so upset? Why am I so sad? And frequently we just put on something distracting.
Oh, yeah.
Why did my boss piss me off? Why did I sleep in another room last night?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I yell at my kids? Rarely, not always, rarely is it really about them. It's about us and learning how we can manage us, learning how we deal with the plank in our own lives, learning how we see things as we are, taking that as an opportunity to become vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right that his restoration and reconciliation with Amanda was, you have it all. I was wrong. I have been looking at work. I have been using work as my new addiction. You have my all. The good and the bad. The fear and the love. And then, of course, the movie ends, and in a shocking fashion, if you're not prepared for it.
I was not prepared for it the first time I watched it.
No, I was like, whoa. And just the loss. And again, Miles Teller does such a great job in that scene, reflecting the tension, the emotion, the loss, the survivor's guilt, the shame that he carries because he wasn't there. Not because he chickened out, not because he wasn't brave enough, but because just that's how it happened. He was doing his job. They were doing theirs. And without that impact, I think without the stuff that Eric had taught him, because he had to learn how to deal with the shame, the survivor's guilt. And so Brendan's able to respond. And this is a quote from the actual dude. It is no longer the guilt of surviving that I carry with me, but the honor of knowing my brothers as you know them, as heroes. Because if he continued to see things as he is, he's not there with his brothers. He in a lot of ways, he let them down in his mind. The honor of knowing my brothers. Again, that goes back to that idea of how are we responding to things? How are we walking through life? How are we when all those around us are gone? What's left? So what you got to close us out, Dustin?
Well, for those of you that are still listening,
this super exciting, uplifting,
yay! It is
joy filled.
If you connect with movies where you like to deeply get to know characters, this is a great movie for you. In fact, at the end of the movie, Eric Marsh's wife, Amanda, says some beautiful things in her interaction with Brendan when he walks into the gym where all the families are there waiting to see if it's their husband that has survived, and they see Brendan. And they all just...
Who nobody is waiting for.
Nobody wants to see him. No one's there for him. And so he immediately walks out, and she runs after him. And it's a beautiful moment of God pursuing his boys and girls. No matter how we feel, no matter how alone, like no one knows us or we don't belong, her character, that whole movie, is the heart of God pursuing people. It's beautiful. And bringing it to present day, like Brendan McDonough, the actual man, not the character in the movie, but the actual man. Do you know what he does for a living? He's a motivational speaker that helps people understand that you cannot live life alone. He wants people to understand what brotherhood looks like. And he goes around and he shares a story about the fire and how he was the only survivor and the thoughts that he wrestled with and still wrestles with all the time. But he lost 19 brothers, but they're not forgotten. And so he's not alone. And he speaks to his story and his journey of survivor's guilt, as you mentioned, and how he's overcome that and helps other people that are in the military or police force or whatever who lose people or their survivor's guilt, and really helps them process. Yeah.
So takeaways for us, just like Brendan, you got to have brothers, you got to have community, and it could be one. It could be who can you be honest, open, and it might not be like a person. Like I have many mentors. None of them are like formal, agreed upon, contracted mentors. It's people I learn from. And I don't learn everything from them, but like, hey, how do you do this? How do you do this? And, I have tech friends who are in tech and they tell me what to do to set up my computer. I have friends who are grill masters. So they tell me, hey, here's how you build a fire, or here's how to, learn lessons from smoking a brisket, or men who are fathers, or even one guy who's like, he's about 15 years older than me. And he's like, yeah, he's telling me if you want to, the life you want to live today in his early 60s starts now in my late 40s. It's like what you do today is going to shape what you're able to do in the future. And in a lot of ways that's encouraging, because I feel frustrated because, I'm not where I want to be, but
Same.
It's like, it takes time.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And in fact, you and I, Paul, we read some similar authors and listen to some similar, brothers and mentors in life and faith. And one of my favorite lines that we've, I think, mentioned before is that we plant seeds right now and we see fruit in a decade or two. And so there's things that I can do right now. But there's not immediate gratification. There's not an immediate change, which we all want in this world. But in the kingdom of God, he's a little bit slower to operate. Sometimes he goes quick, but more often than not, him fathering us as his boys, he's wanting to mature us into the men that he meant us to be from the beginning of time, and he sees us to be. And he's healing those parts of us that we are scared to death to face, like Eric Marsh did. But when we do, we can become more wholehearted and the man that we're supposed to be.
Because this movie skimmed over a lot of the hard work Brendan put in.
Yes.
We see some of the high points or low points, as you might say. But he put in a lot of work, both in study and physically learning how to become a firefighter. But we don't see that. And so we get frustrated when it doesn't go as quickly as it does in the movies. But when you take time to say, oh yeah, this might take me 5 years to do, this might take me 10 years to do. And honestly, it's always going to be 10 years away. That's the Matthew McConaughey thing of when he was younger. I think when he was 15 or something, they asked, who's your hero? And he said, me in 10 years. And so in 10 years, they said, are you your hero now? It's like, no, it's still me in 10 years. It's like, that's who I look up to. Like, that's who I focus. This is how I guide my life, is who do I want to be in 10 years? What can I do to move towards it? And for Brendan, to wrap this up, it was, I want to be a good dad. That is what's most important. So what's most important to you? Who do you want to become in 10 years? And then take the steps today to move towards that. Steps, not jumps, not leaps, not driving. It's going to be a step. And sometimes there's going to be steps back. Sometimes there's going to be step forward, but always a step moving that direction. So Dustin, thank you very much for talking about this, introducing me. Most of the movies you've suggested I hadn't seen. So I appreciate your opening my eyes to some of these great, inspiring, and most of them are true-ish stories, at least. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. It's an honor to be able to be a part of conversations like this. I feel like I take one or two or more things away where I'm like, wow, that's why I had that conversation with Paul today. It was so helpful. So thanks for inviting me on again, man.
Yeah. So this has been Paul McDonald and Dustin Oprea talking about Only the Brave. We hope that you guys enjoyed it, and hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?